If the past few years have taught us anything, it's that we tend to overestimate our resilience. And dangerous or not, people want to get through their day and will just do what they want to do. Having said that, what's more dangerous than most people think? Story 1. Driving while sleepy or tired is definitely dangerous, and you will hallucinate. I have real bad insomnia to the point where I involuntarily stay woke for at most 50-something hours. It's rare I ever stay up 3 days, but unfortunately it does happen to me. One time I was awake for 2 days and didn't feel a bit drowsy, nor did I feel sleepy. I was on the second shift at work at the time, and I did Uber on the side when I got off work. So my first day I did Uber. Didn't get tired. Got home, didn't get sleep. Worked a full shift at work and didn't even nod off. Trust me, insomnia is infuriating. Anyways, my second day woke up. It had been roughly 56 hours since I had woken up and used Uber once again. Before I go further, here's the thing about insomnia and why it sucks so hard. Because your body is genetically meant to not be up for 24 hours, when the drowsiness finally catches up to you, it hits like an elephant pushing 3 5-ton fire trucks armed with explosives. In other words, that drowsiness hits hard. So anyways, I had been using Uber for about 2 hours and still didn't get tired until I had to drive to another city, which was about 50 minutes away from where I live. I had 2 guys in the back and was about 10 minutes away from their destination, and then that elephant with the 5-ton exploding trucks finally collided with me. I suddenly got beyond sleepy. Good thing it was spring at the time because I just raised down my window and let the air blow on me, and it woke me up. Unfortunately for me, it only worked up until I dropped those guys off. Because I knew at that point I finally was ready to go to bed, and my destination was either my bed or heaven's gates. Unfortunately for me, my house was now 50 minutes away from me, and on a long stretch of highway in the dark hours of the night at about 2 a.m., that was one of the scariest drives I had ever had. I literally began to hallucinate and started seeing things in the road that weren't really there. I would see animals crossing the road and start seeing flashes. But the worst thing, I decided that I would read billboards out loud as I drove past them, believing that talking or yelling out loud would help. And it did to a degree. That is, until I came across one billboard and was starting to read it, when out of nowhere, and I kid you not, the letters started dancing on the billboard. And then they started to jump off the billboard and started dancing towards me. Jesus was literally in the wheel for me that night because I hallucinated for basically 50 entire minutes while nodding off until I finally made it home safely by the grace of God. Needless to say, when I finally laid down, thank goodness it was the weekend because I was literally knocked out for about 23 hours. I mean, I actually slept an entire day away. So yeah, driving while sleepy is definitely dangerous as hell. When I drove rideshare, I faced this issue a lot. I would keep a blanket and a pillow in the trunk of my car. In California, there are a lot of places where they outlaw sleeping. They're trying to cull the homeless population. But I would try to find a place that was safe where I could nap. It was essential. That is the worst thing you can do. And especially people and customers will take note of that and try and report you. You don't want that to happen. Story 2. My bio dad took me to Florida when I was 10, a weak swimmer, and let me go swim in the ocean unsupervised. In hindsight, he may actually have been trying to unalive me. He was a terrible father. I can't count how many times he put me in mortal peril over his stupid decisions, but then again, he was usually putting himself in them too, so it may be a lack of common sense or care. Anyways, I got caught in a riptide, which I had never even heard of, also being from the Midwest. I swam and swam as hard as I could towards the shore and got nowhere. I looked, and I was actually further out than I was before. I was panicking and screaming over and over again, and no one heard me. There was a lot of kids screaming and playing. I got so tired after a while that I could hardly kick my legs anymore. My strength was failing. I was just keeping my head above water when a guy came to get me. On the way there, he swam into something that scratched across his bare stomach, and he had an abrasion across his middle that looked like road rash. He even had some blood spots forming across the surface of it. He carried me in and laid me on the sand, and I could see his bleeding abrasion stomach. And even though I was so exhausted and scared, I felt really worried for him. I thanked him and asked him what happened to his stomach. He said, "I don't know. Something went past me in the water, and it felt scratchy like sandpaper." As an adult, I realized that I was caught in a rip current that would have most certainly drowned me, and the guy likely ran into the abrasive skin of a freaking shark. Where were we? New Smyrna Beach, shark attack capital of the world. I literally can't believe either of us survived that day. And my dad is an idiot, or else he was just trying to get out of paying child support the rest of my growing up years. Who knows? That one is spooky. I remember when Jaws came out in the theaters, and it really sparked some fear in people's hearts about swimming at the beach. Sharks usually are not very aggressive towards people. There's only certain areas where they really are very aggressive, like at New Smyrna. But this is scary on both counts, getting caught up and swept away at sea or getting attacked by a shark. It's a real dilemma. Story 3. The ocean. I did sail training once. On the last day, a storm was coming. Could see the clouds coming up, dark gray. Had it been a fine day, we would have been an hour from home port. However, the storm had some strong winds, and we fought. It was bad from around 5 p.m. We fought until 5 a.m., then let the winds push us up the coast to the next river inlet. Captain decided to have us go out to sea and around the storm to try and ride the winds back. Not the best idea. The only reason we're alive is because the guy at the helm had done Sydney to Hobart races before, in worse weather. The captain in number 1 hid below deck, though he had to go out and bring down the sails, being the most experienced. There was so much water slamming us that his jacket inflated while he was doing that. Jacket thought it was underwater. At one point, they suggested we use wind power and turn off the engine to not overwork it. We did that for one wave. The sky was black, the water was black, and the land was black. I asked how big the seas were. He said, "Judging by that one, we didn't go over 1 meter taller than the boat is long." So we were in an 11-meter boat, 33 feet, and the waves were 12 meters high, 36 feet. He put the engines back on after that wave. Probably good that I couldn't see them otherwise. I would have really freaked out. Yeah, when seas are rough, it's better to be above deck. Yes, tethered to the boat, so at least you can see what's trying to end you. So after the sun comes up and we're pulling into another dock that the captain did not want to do because he was too cheap to pay mooring, we saw that all the safety gear on the back had been washed off. Probably ended up on a New Zealand beach, and the boat hull had been twisted so badly it was a write-off. I didn't even go near a beach for a few years after that. After I got home, the news reported that people passed in that storm. August 2003 for those playing at home. I can almost understand not going near a beach. And in some ways I can't. Being out in the waters and sailing, I can understand how you wouldn't want to go that deep into the ocean ever again. Did he feel like when he was on the beach that the waves were just going to reach out and pick him up and throw him out into the ocean again? If this was as scary as an experience as he's describing, I can sort of see that. Story 4. I'm a teacher in Japan now, but I'm from southeastern Arizona, just barely a few minutes outside of the Sonoran Desert border. Every grade at my school goes through themes throughout the year, and mine, 5th grade, is biomes. We're currently talking about desert biomes, and wouldn't you know that one of them is the Sonoran Desert. One day we were making a packing list for what you should bring to a desert. It's a very interesting shared writing activity because the kids have basically zero experience with deserts. I told them the number one rule of being in the desert is you can never have too much water. Even after saying this, they kept giving me low numbers in terms of water volume. We eventually settled on 10 liters. But basically, the whole class thinks this is too much water. For context, the packing list isn't for going on a 1-hour hike. This is an overnight camping in the actual heat of the desert kind of packing list. As someone who lived in the Sonoran Desert for over 20 years, with 3 spent in the even hotter desert of Death Valley, let me tell you this. If you still have room in your car, backpack, whatever for more stuff, you don't have enough water. Story 5. I remember when I used to work 95 to 105 hours per week. The owner of the company wanted me to come in with the first crew and leave with the last. I would normally get out of work around 9 to 10 p.m. and still wanted to have a life. So every other day after work, I'd go home, pick something up to eat and eat on the way home, and take a shower and head out to a friend's house 45 minutes away. Wouldn't leave until about 2:30 a.m. so I could go home and get ready for work. Done this for a few weeks before it really caught up to me. I felt myself dozing off and would blast the AC, windows down, radio loud, and for a short bit, it'd work, until I had to take my exit off the expressway. Knocked out as I took the exit and went straight when the road curved. Went over the curb, through the grass, over the curb to the road I wanted to enter, went across the median, across more lanes, crossed 4 lanes of road, and back over the curb on the other side. Luckily, no damage to myself or the vehicle, nor did I hit anybody or anything. Again, this was around 2:30ish in the morning. After that, I cut my hours of work and slowed down on going out. Story 6. About the tinnitus thing, I've had it ever since I was a really little kid. I think it had to do with my head smashing into a glass case or something. I very vaguely have the memory of my father and grandma holding a flashlight over me and making sure I didn't have glass stuck in me. But that's the earliest thing I can think of. Didn't even know I had it specifically until I was a freshman in high school and we talked about it in a psychology class. From a young age, though, I heard a ringing ever so often and asked what it was a few times. My grandma, not knowing what I was talking about, thought I heard some kind of gas appliance and told me it was the sound of gas. I actually forgot about it dozens of times as a kid. I have a mild case, but it only hurts when it's really quiet, like at night. And if I'm not thinking about it, it usually fades into the background. So just like how I thought everyone had bad eyesight, I also thought everyone just had a ringing in their ears. It doesn't really bother me, though. For me, that would be completely scary. Some of us have a little bit of ringing in their ears. We don't have perfect hearing. But for me, doing voiceovers, if I had pain in my ears at certain times, that would be really detrimental. I'm really glad I don't have anything like this. Story 7. I was driving home one night and was exhausted after having to drive to a city 3 hours away, deal with some stuff there, and I was somewhere in hour 2 of the drive back when I started getting really tired around 10 p.m. This was a couple of years ago, and I don't remember the exact time. Just that it was a time I'm normally wide awake. The road was a small, windy, 2-lane country back road with woods on either side. It passed through a small town that had a T-intersection 20 miles later that I needed to turn at. There was a BP gas station at the intersection that was super bright, making it impossible to miss. I remember passing through that smaller town, and I guess I fell asleep at some point, or very close to it, because the next thing I know, I'm at a stoplight 30 miles past that town where the road turns into a state highway. I have no memory of those 30 miles and no idea how I didn't crash. I pulled off at the first gas station I saw and took an hour nap before I turned around to go home. I didn't feel like trying my luck again, let alone twice in one night. Story 8. That rip current is no joke. I too live in Florida and couldn't swim well a few summers past. I was just 12 feet from the shore of the beach and noticed people were much further out having a good time. Before I knew it, I was 20 feet away. I figure it's no problem and swim directly back. That was my biggest mistake, as the ocean was pulling me back. I panicked and thought I was seriously gonna perish. Thankfully, my older cousin saw me and somehow threw me back towards the shore like it was nothing. I was never so glad to be on land again and have my cousin save my life. Moral of the story? Don't overestimate your abilities because you see some others doing something and think you can. And swim to the side of a current so it'll push you back to shore, not away from it.
Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 9. Sleeping in contact lenses. They will eventually fuse to your eyeballs and you can go blind. Also, while modern society often pushes this idea, you don't have to eat every single bite of food from your plate if you feel full. It's not rude to not finish the plate. People have limits, and we don't all have the metabolism of the average teenage boy. That kind of obsession will likely lead to overeating, weight gain, obesity, and the health complications that usually accompany obesity. Also, replacing showers with spray-on deodorant. If you're not in a well-ventilated room, that stuff will suffocate and poison you over time. It happened tragically to a young teenage boy. The same goes for any aerosol spray. Using one excessively without proper ventilation in the room or a mask will expire you eventually. There was a time when I had contact lenses. They were more rigid and they were definitely more expensive. I liked not having to have glasses and having the pressure on these, but the times when I slept in them accidentally, they hurt. I really didn't like that. Now it's just not worth the trouble of getting those. I haven't even considered LASIK. Story 10. The alcohol one is super important because A, there's no healthy amount of alcohol you can drink, contrary to what things such as wine is good for circulation may tell you. Yes, it has some benefits in that regard, but nothing certain foods and habits can't do already. And the cons of even one glass outweigh the pros. And B, I know several people, some of them barely over 18 years old, that's the legal drinking age where I live, are already developing a dependence on alcohol, but don't think they do because they don't become aggressive or start fights or get blackout drunk. But even getting slightly tipsy on a regular basis can very quickly turn into a dependence. All it takes is making it a habit to send you on a downward spiral. It's really insidious, and the way people normalize it is terrifying. Story 11. Fun fact, I've always preferred single-section garage doors, and I lament their disappearance because when a single-panel garage door is fully open, the springs are under zero tension. Single-section garage doors balance over their hinges when they're open, so they don't require any spring tension to remain open. Not only are those springs easy to replace safely as long as the door is fully open, but the door can't fall and hurt you if the spring suddenly fails. The springs on single-panel garage doors are only there to help you open and close the door controllably. Multi-section folding garage doors simply don't have that safety feature. Story 12. Nodding off when driving is so overlooked. Everyone thinks they just power through. My brother-in-law expired this year at the age of 27, leaving behind 2 children. He was a good man. He was just exhausted from running his own small farm, on his own mostly, and also working hard hours to plow the roads. Fell asleep one night and hit 2 trees. Most likely perished relatively quickly. Just heart-wrenching to lose him. Don't try to power through. Just give in and pull over and take a break from driving if you're falling asleep. A power nap could save your life. There's more than one of these stories, and again, I will say it. If you feel even the slightest bit drowsy, find a safe place to take a nap. Maybe you get woken up by a cop. Just explain to them the situation. I've done that. A cop has knocked on my window, and I've just said, I was feeling a little tired, and I pulled over so I wouldn't be a nuisance or a danger on the road. About 98% of the time, they fully understand. Story 13. Both of my parents were unalived in separate driving while tired incidents. The first one, my dad fell asleep at the wheel, and luckily he was the only casualty. The second, we were rear-ended by a woman who fell asleep at the wheel, and my mom lost control of the car and we ended up in a rollover. The lives of my mom and 2 of our dogs were lost, and a service dog was no longer able to perform her duties. The woman wasn't even charged despite driving while impaired. I hope the knowledge of what she did haunts her for the rest of her days. Story 14. The concussion one reminds me of a scene in Archer. An agent was knocked unconscious, and it pretty much ruined him. The fact that he didn't get permanent damage was treated as miraculous, but he had to see neurologists often, which ruined his finances. He was no longer fit for active field duty. He was left on a wheelchair, not that he actually needed it. Granted, it could have been far worse, but the show recognizes that getting knocked out is super bad for you. On that note, every major character has tinnitus from constantly firing guns. It is stated to have messed up their private lives. Some can't sleep without a fan. Story 15. You left something out. I was hanging out with a newer friend of mine, and we were talking about what we had done that day, and I mentioned that I had just mowed my lawn. He told me to be careful doing that, and became extremely concerned, which I thought was atypical of him, since he was a young guy like me. He then pulled his pants leg and showed me that his entire muscle on the outer side of his lower leg was gone. Like it was just bone with skin on it. I was horrified. When he was 15, his mother made him mow the lawn so he could watch his favorite TV show. Wanting to get it over with ASAP since his show was about to start soon, he rushed. The property had a small hill, and as he went over the hill, he pulled a Dukes of Hazzard maneuver. The mower went airborne, flipped upside down, and he landed on top of it. Story 16. Aerated water. In the sewage treatment process, the water will be pumped full of air, and then it will be dissolved together, like salt water is. I think it has something to do with letting the bacteria treat the water better. When you dissolve air into water, you remove all buoyancy from it. Jumping into a vat of aerated water is pretty much no different to jumping off a cliff. You cannot swim in it no matter how many fish you have in your DNA. Apparently, quite a few people have drowned in what is essentially sewer water because their friend dared them to jump in the poo pool. Story 17. I was born and raised in Florida as well. One time, me and some buddies went out to the beach during a small hurricane that was a few days offshore to go skimboarding. I ended up at one point going just under my waist deep. Let me tell you, I felt the power of that current trying to rip me under. I firmly believe if I was another 2 feet in, let's say, above my waist, it would have taken me without a doubt. I was just shallow enough to be able to leg strength my butt back to land. Did not go back in, and told my friends they were as good as unalive if they did. Story 18. I've had a state trooper force me to leave a rest stop when I pulled over to get some sleep. This has happened multiple times, but this one in particular, he told me some stupid reason why, like it's for my safety. I told him directly that I was falling asleep on the road and would probably crash because there were no motels nearby, and he told me I had to go anyway. We survived somehow, but I never forgot that stupid stuff. Makes me wonder how many other people this has happened to. This goes to what I was talking about before. I've never had that experience. I've had some people ask me to move to a different place. Someone may have told me that where I was at while I was driving was not the safest area in the world, but I've never been asked to leave a rest stop. In fact, sometimes where I've gone to a rest stop to try and get a nap, the whole place was full of people. It was no parking spaces, people napping. Story 19. The first one about tired driving is so weird to me because here in Germany, trucks actually have a kind of black box which tracks the rest you take. You're only allowed to drive a certain amount of hours before you have to rest. If cops stop you and check your rest times and you weren't resting, then you at the very least will be fined. There is some room for error because you don't always have places to rest, especially on the Autobahn. But within a certain margin, you have to rest. Story 20. The whole rip current thing got me too once. It had been like 15 years since I had last been at a beach. I know how to swim, but I hadn't done it for many years. So I swam out a bit after some friends. They passed me and went somewhere else. I wanted to follow them back to shore. After a while, I realized that I just didn't make any progress at all. I thought I was not swimming the right way and I didn't want to look like an idiot. So I kept trying and trying until eventually it let off and I somehow broke out of it. I was really, really exhausted after that, but I hadn't even realized what was going on. Story 21. One thing that's more dangerous than what most people think is apparently getting aggressive with people or forgetting what exactly personal space is. Even if that person is your family member, these situations of you getting unreasonably aggressive or disrespectful to their personal space will stack up. Eventually, something may just end up snapping. Arguing over small things in your house? If you don't stop yourself from arguing over literally nothing when a situation is closest to your mind, then how will your habits affect you when stuff hits the fan? Also, arguing in your own house? It's your family, but those are also other humans who can actually get pretty ticked off if you give that person enough reason to get angry at you.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.